And the last one, which I learned through the medical discharge, was that we all have a level of dependency on an array of different things, whether it be the obvious stuff like the air we breathe, the food we eat, or what we drink, but also like screen time, smart devices, our car to get to work, my computer here for me to be able to work from home. You could go down a whole list of different things that you rely on to some degree. And the problem I had, the lesson I learned from that medical discharge is that I was too dependent on the military to the point where I nearly failed as a direct result of that. So I learned that in order to get to build that level of the resilience, I needed to spread that dependency out into something I call the safety net of resilience.
The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guest, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their sole purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Wake Up Your Soul. Today's guest is David Jarvis, and we're going to talk about overcoming adversity. He is a former British Army veteran, and he's going to talk to us about the Invictus Games, which, if you don't know what that is, those are the games for the military, the wounded military. So let's welcome David to hear his journey.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being here. Your story is really interesting because it just continued to unfold. It seems like, I'm sure it felt like that for you too, where it seemed like it just kept unfolding into difficulty after difficulty. So let's go back to being in the military. You were in the British Army. How are things going there?
So I was in for the long haul, is the short and curlies of that one. The typical British Army career is 22 years. That's the kind of the target, because at the end of that, you would then, in essence, you could leave the military at that point, leave the army at that point, I should say. And you would then get a pension until you kick it, basically. So you could join at 18 and leave at 40 and then go and get another job. And then you've got that pension in the background to kind of cover some of the basic bills. So, but my plan was to extend and hopefully stay in because we had our family late. So my kids, I've got two daughters, they are 4 and 6 now, but my youngest was due at the time of my medical discharge. And the original plan prior to the medical discharge was that we would stay in long enough for her to get to that age where she starts her first proper school. And then we would look to put down roots and find a home that we could call our anchor point, so to speak. The significance of that is that over the whole 21 years I was in, I moved, give or take, on average, every about 18 months. And a move was a different location, different unit, different systems, different teams, and so on. And my wife and I have been married now, it'll be 14 years this year. And she moved, I think, over that period. So that's roughly about half my career. So she moved at least four physical location moves, I think, over that time. So to put kids through that as well wouldn't have been ideal. And that's why we ultimately had the family late.
Mm.
But yeah, that was the intent originally, was to go for the long haul. I enjoyed being a communication engineer. That was my job. I was also what they called an all-arms physical training instructor. So I got a massive background in fitness, did various studies did various different kinds of training and nutrition and such like as well. It's something I still do today. Both of those things, in fact. So yeah, it was kind of cut short, shall we say. Yeah.
Well, I want to get into your story, but I'm just listening. And as a mom, and you were touching on it very briefly, just with children, how difficult it is to move around so much. And People talk so much about how resilient children are, and I don't know that they are really as resilient as people like to say and believe. I think they are just very, very good at bearing things. They don't know how to even express what they're thinking and they're feeling. And moves are definitely very difficult on children for sure,
Mm.
especially when it's every 18 months or whatever it be. If it's frequent and I mean, one move, okay, but, multiple,
Mhm.
it just at some point they've gotta feel a little I mean, even as adults, it can be hard if we don't feel like we have a solid friendship base, right? Where it's just a
Absolutely.
constant change. And so for children, they can't understand why that feels weird to them, but I'm sure there is some sort of hole in their life where it's like, "Huh, yeah, I gotta start all over. Here we go. Gotta make new friends," and then they're gone. And so I could see where there's a struggle to create bonds because at some
Mhm.
point it's also like, "Eh, why bother?" You know? Like
That's it. That's it. But that was my thought as well. I mean, you see it. I saw it through the first half of my career. Some of the challenges that families were having, and the constant moving schools. The way some of them mitigated that was by sending kids off to boarding schools and things like that, so they would then stay put. As tempting as that is sometimes, like with my little terror bags, I don't think I could do that. You know what I mean? It's nice having them around, and being around them. And I suppose I can appreciate that a bit more because the when my eldest was growing up, those first couple of years, I was still in the service. So I didn't see them that often because I would work at base for maybe 10 days and then I go home for 4. So I do like a long weekend because I
Mhm,
lived so far, I was based so far away, sorry, from where they were in the latter part of my career. It was better to do that. So I had a day to travel, have a weekend, so to speak, a full 2 days, and then travel back on the fourth day, if that makes
mhm,
sense. So that was kind of how I did it. And it's nice having the luxury to be able to work from home and be part of the walks to and from school and doing the day-to-day routines with them and such like as well. So, I mean, we recently got a dog, which is quite a transition in the family, and
yeah,
the kids like to get involved with that as well. And one of the things I've tried to do, the condition I set when we got the dog was that we would get him trained and we would teach the kids how to do it as well. And that's been quite an interesting battle to try and teach the kids patience and to be clear. And when they're giving commands out and they're telling a dog to do something, they've got to make sure the dog knows it's a command, and all this
mhm,
kind of stuff. And it's quite entertaining sometimes when you see my 4-year-old telling my
yeah,
dog to sit and to give her a paw and give him his treat and such like.
yeah.
It can be quite entertaining.
Yeah. Oh, I know. My 4-year-old, we have a dog. She's like 1.5, but she's so small that I didn't really bother to train her. But then she's like kinda naughty. So I thought maybe some training would, I don't know, make her a little bit better. I'm not really sure if it's gonna work. But anyway, so I started trying to teach her to sit, and my little one's just trying to give her treats. And I'm like, but she didn't do it yet. I was like, you can't just give it to her. And so then it's like, and then I'm like forcing the dog into a sit. And she's like, well, mom, she's not really sitting. You just pushed her into a sit. And I'm like, well, that's why you show her body like what it feels like to sit. And it's definitely funny training dogs with little kids because yeah, they're like, what is happening right now? Let's just give them all the treats for fun. Um,
Well, here's the trick: you
yeah.
put the treat and you slide it down the back of their head, and then they sit.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
And
That
then
one,
if you want to lie down, it's the reverse. You put it under their
yeah,
chest. Yeah.
I did that with our big dog. It's weird. I told my husband, maybe something's like wrong with her spine, but she does not want to lay down. It's so weird. And even when we had a dog trainer, she couldn't get the dog to lay down. And she's a great dog, very obedient. Like leave it is a great command for her. She does super well with that. But yeah, when you try to get her to lay down and yeah, you pull it down and it's like I have to like push into her chest with the treat to cause then she's just like and she'll just keep switching back, like, she does not want to lay down, I don't know, and she's smart, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but,
Yeah.
yeah,
I learned from YouTube. So this is our first dog. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just went, right, how do I do this? Let's just
yeah.
do it one step at a time, work from there. And I
Huh,
just saw the video of someone doing that and underneath, and yeah, it seemed to work. We've got black
yeah,
lab, so I think they'll do anything for food. His nemesis is a boiled egg. I reckon
yeah.
I could get him to somersault for a boiled egg. Seriously.
Yeah, well, ours, I mean, she'd work for anything, to be honest, that dog she's like this big, huge roly-poly, she's yeah. Anyway, so, David, let's go back to your story. So, you're in the military, and then what starts happening to lead to this medical discharge?
So the nutshell of it is that I describe it to people as that I'm a walking bag of disaster. I've got something wrong with every bit of me, pretty much. Busted shoulders, knees, busted my wrists, a couple of ribs, 2 places in my back, and then just to rub it all in, a bit of PTSD, just to mix it all together as well. It's not a happy mix, and over time as well. So it just got to a point where they'd moved me to a location, to a role that, although it was predominantly UK based, at the time I was actually supporting the National Health Service here in the UK at the back end of the pandemic. So I was responsible for all of the communications assets in the north of England that was used in support of that mission. And whilst it was predominantly desk bound, it was there was the potential that I need to be deployed. So for that reason, I was put forward to a medical board for them to determine whether or not I should stay employed or not. And ultimately, they made the decision that I shouldn't be. And it was a bit gutting because there was only really a year to go before I hit that 22-year mark. And like I said, I was intending on extending because when they made that decision, that was the August of 2021, and Emily was born in December. And the original plan was we would try and, I think my 22-year point was expected to be the March of 2023. And the plan was we'd try and extend to 25 or maybe even beyond, but I didn't have any aspiration to leave. I had no plan. I didn't know what I would do in Civvy Street, in civilian life. There was opportunities to get accreditations against your military experience, so you could line it up with Civvy qualifications. But it was just something I wasn't really that interested in because it added no value in the military. It
Mhm.
didn't matter what letters you had behind your name and all these post-nominal stuff and degrees and whatever. And because I had no aspiration to do anything in civilian life, it just didn't really, so I had no plan. And yeah, when they gave the medical discharge, because it was the pandemic was on, it was over the phone as well. It wasn't like it was over a desk in front of a group of medical officers, but they still did work it the same way in that they read through your file, they'd ask you loads of questions on it. It can last anywhere from like 2 or 3 hours. Mine was 3.5 hours long over the phone in an office. And the office was running on a kind of a skeleton crew because we're back on the pandemic. So I was the only one in. So the end of the conversation was the bit that was kind of surreal because the doctor said, as nice as she was perfectly pleasant about it. But at the end of the conversation, it still wasn't really that nice to hear. And she did apologize for what she had to say, but she had to say it. And the way she said it was, I had to cease all working activity from the moment the phone went down, hand over all my active work and focus on resettlement. And once I hit my end date, which was in January, so you're talking, what, 5.5 months, something like that. Once I hit that date, I would no longer be a serving soldier. I would no longer be entitled to support from the military. So I'd have between now and then to get what I could. And then that was that, basically. So phone went down and I was looking around the room going, well, how do I do that? There's no one here to hand it to, and this
Yeah.
stuff is important right now. My chest is crying out for help. So what do I do? So the ball didn't really start rolling properly until the end of that month. And obviously the clock's ticking.
Mhm.
So I think I managed to get myself in with a support officer who essentially managed my time to be able to help me get on to different things as quickly as possible. So whilst on one thing, they were organizing the next, if that makes sense. And we're talking anything from health and safety courses, first aid at work, to learning to write a CV again, interview techniques, all the kind of things that you would typically do when you're leaving school or college, university to go and get your first job. I mean, bear in mind, it had been a couple of decades since I'd done it. So my mind is going 10 to the dozen because I've got no idea what I was going to do. In my local area, I was reaching out to taxi companies, to shelf packing companies, to shops and stuff for shelf stacking, to box packing, in back of truck shops when they load up all the cargo trucks, you name it. And it was just lucky that I came across this. I think it was a Facebook job site, and I happened to come across this ad. And I think I either recognized the name or I recognized something about it. And I contacted the guy because he was an ex-signaler as well. So I was at Royal Signals. And he knew the position I was in. He knew the role I had. He understood the job I was doing. And he said, you'd be perfect in this job. And that was technical project management.
Mhm.
So I ended up getting a job, which is the same company I work for now. And basically, I move around doing various technical projects for various kind of different companies. I'm essentially pimped out to different companies to kind of smooth over projects that are ongoing, really. It's good. It's fun. It's sort of kind of like being in the military still, except I just don't
Yeah.
have to physically move. I just change jobs, so to speak.
Well,
So
you sound like a very proactive person because I feel like there's a lot of people that would get that discharge and just bury their head down and be like, what am I going to do?
It was tempting. It
And
was
not do
tempting.
anything instead of just like, okay, I'm just going to start throwing some lines out there and just see what happens, what I can hook onto. You definitely got after it. Okay. And then when does the diabetes stuff come in to play?
So that was like completely unexpected. It was one of those kind of wow moments, like, how is this happening to me? So
Yeah.
basically, there was a number of different situations that happened around that medical discharge, and I was probably stressed to the max. And I think rolling the clock forward like really quickly, we ended up having to do another house move after I got out because we had a small house, 2-bed place. I was working from home. We had 2 kids at this point, so we knew that was too small. So we needed to get somewhere else. The mortgage very nearly fell through because I hadn't paid much attention to my credit scores, everything else while I was in the military. Put that down to the institutionalization, just being an ignorant twat, basically, excuse my French. But basically, and yeah, that was probably the lowest point because the mortgage fell through initially because of my scoring and I had to do something about it. So I had to get rid of the car finance, all the other things I was paying bills on and stuff like that. And we lost X amount of £1,000 on those things because the agreements we had on, you know what I mean? And that was the kind of low point. That, and the reason I bring that up is because the doctors think that period, that medical discharge period, the stress I went through,
Mhm.
they think that is what did damage to my autoimmune system.
Mm.
Because typically there's 2 reasons you can get type 1 diabetes. One is it's hereditary. It comes from family, particularly your direct family, so your parents, or it can be damage that's done to your autoimmune system. It's typically in the younger generation, so it's usually kids, teenagers that get it.
Yeah.
It's rare that it comes to adults my age or older. Not unheard of. I think the oldest I've heard of is like 80 or something like that, I think.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
but it's very rare to get it later in life,
Yeah.
is the bottom line. But neither of my parents have got it, and I'm one of 5 siblings, and I'm the only one that's got it as well. So
Mm.
that's why the doctors think that period had something to do with it. Anyway, rolling the clock forward very quickly. I got help from military charities with the mental health, with the PTSD, with getting some help with the medical stuff as well. That led me to the Invictus Games. And like you said, the Invictus Games is it's for serving and ex-serving personnel who represent their respective countries' armed forces. It's a multi-day, multi-sports event that involves countries from around the world. It's kind of like the Paralympics, if that makes sense. So,
Mhm.
but it's a little bit more often. So it's about every 18 months to 2 years.
Okay.
But there's one key detail is that you can only compete twice in your lifetime. So I got selected for the team in the January of 23, and I wanted to go on it to get help with my recovery journey with all the injuries that I'd had, the PTSD, the dramas I'd had with my motivation and confidence, and the damage I took with my mental health and all that kind of stuff. I
Mhm.
wanted to kind of get myself back in the zone again. I mean, I'd been drinking more, I'd gained a lot of weight, I'd lost my sort of appetite for doing loads of fitness and all that kind of stuff, all the things that were bread and butter before. And I just needed to get help to get back in the zone, really.
Mhm.
So I took it as an opportunity to kind of milk the hell out of it. So I signed up to
Smart.
everything that I could. And it was, let me think, I did 4 different events, which was the maximum you could do as long as they didn't coincide during the games. And I did powerlifting, I did indoor rowing, swimming, and cycling as well. And so there was no aspiration to do well. I just wanted to,
Okay.
milk the hell out of it. So the crazy part here is I've never really had an aspiration to do well at anything per se. I've never had a desire to win anything or be the best or anything like that nature. Most of this stuff you see behind us, I've gotten in the last couple of years, starting with the one on my left shoulder, right, as you're looking at me. And that was the medal from the Invictus Games. But the only reason that came about was because the 1st of May, I weighed 86.5 kilos. I was checking periodically because I wanted to lose weight.
Mhm.
The lighter you are on the bike, the faster you can go, the less power you need to go quickly, basically,
Mhm.
or the less effort, I should say. So I was trying to lose weight healthily. I knew how to do it. I've been doing it for many years. So I was training regularly. I was eating right, but I was starting to feel more tired in that first week of May of 2023.
Okay.
So I started eating more fruit, drinking more fruit juice, all that kind of stuff. And I started feeling more tired all the time. I started feeling thirsty all the time. So I was drinking more water, but I was going to the toilet more. And then I was going to the toilet in the night. And then I was going to the toilet more regularly in the night. And then it was every 90 minutes throughout the day and night. And that happened over a period of days.
Mhm.
So that then explained why I was tired all the time. I was drinking more water because I was thirsty. I was going to the toilet more because I was drinking more water. There's logical reasons for all
Yeah.
this. But the weight's still coming off. So I'm increasing my calorie intake for that reason. So I got up to a maximum. I think I hit about 4,000 calories a day is what I was
Wow.
eating. I was still training, still functioning. I'm still working at home as well. So, but things weren't adding up. The numbers on the bike weren't adding up. I wasn't able to lift what I could usually lift in weights. I was struggling all the time. And by the 15th of May, I'd given up trying to figure out what was going on.
Mhm.
And that's when I called the doctors. And they basically sent me for tests in a nutshell and rolled the clock forward to the end of the week. They turned around and said, look, your blood sugars are off the charts. Some of the highest numbers we've seen. If you hadn't come in now, it might have only been another couple of days and it could have been in the box, is what they told me.
Mm.
So that was when they basically said what I had was diabetic ketoacidosis. And what that meant is that my pancreas had stopped producing insulin. So my body, to get its energy, was eating away at the fat stores and the energy in my muscles. And that's why I was losing weight so fast.
Mhm.
The problem is the byproduct of burning fat is ketones. So when your ketones get too high, basically it's turning your blood acidic. And
Mhm.
that is ultimately what was killing me in a nutshell.
Wow.
So on that day, I was a touch over 70 kilos. So I'd gone from 86 and a half on the 1st of May to a touch over 70 on the 19th of May. So it's certainly a great way of losing weight, but not something I would recommend to anybody.
What were your symptoms at the time other than you were drinking a lot of water and you were losing weight and your muscles were not functioning like they used to? Did you feel lightheaded? Did you feel jittery? What were you feeling?
So the only other sort of distinct symptom that I remember was like a burning sensation at the back of my throat. And the doctors told me that, and that was in the second week as well. That was the second week of May. The doctors told me that that was the point at which the ketones in my body were getting so high, my body was trying to counter it by breathing them out. And
Wow.
that's why I was getting that burning sensation in my throat. There was definitely times when I felt so lethargic that I struggled to stand up or keep my
Mhm.
eyes open. And I just put that down to tiredness as opposed to feeling dizzy or anything like that. But the blunt truth of it is that I was just kind of grising it out, as we say in the military. I was just trying to make it work. I just
Yeah.
assumed it was because I was training twice a day and I wasn't used to doing that again because it'd been a long time since I'd done that. And
I think
wait,
in life, there's these periods in life where we don't
yeah,
always feel, or at least for, I mean, obviously I struggle with a lot of different autoimmune and different things, but so for me, I mean, maybe not for everybody, it's like this, but there's definitely periods where it's like
yeah,
I feel my normal, and then other periods where I don't. But you've been through so much, and it's just like, okay, we just got to push through this. It will balance
mhm,
out at some point. Let me just keep going. And you just, I get it. Like, I've had a lot of serious things, and I basically wait until the point where it's like I'm basically dying, and then I'm gonna get the help because otherwise it's like, well, for me, I'd been to the doctor for so many different things, and when the symptoms are on the more mild side, they never seem to be able to figure out what's going on, so until it gets super
mhm.
severe, so I'm just like, "Well, I'm just gonna," like, every time I've ever gone to the ER, it's basically like, "You've got a couple hours to save me here," because it's like, if I go too soon, I think they're just gonna send me home, and I know something's wrong, so I'm just gonna wait a little bit longer. It's a terrible strategy, I do not recommend.
Right. You've got to get your money's worth out of these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what I did, really. I mean, not deliberately, of course, but I
Yes.
didn't realize that it was that serious. The bit that made it really hit home, though, was when the doctor said to me, they basically pulled up this chart and it was like a bar chart. It went red, amber, green. And at the green end, I remember it was a number 40 there. And it was basically, they look at the red blood cells and they live for 90 days. And basically, they take an average blood glucose reading using your red blood cells in a nutshell. So basically, you get a 3-month average. And the ideal number that type 1 diabetics in the UK need to get is 40. I think it's a different scale they use in America, but
Okay.
the on the red end, it's 119. And at that is that on the chart, I remember seeing a black arrow with above it saying, if you're here, you need to seek emergency help now.
Mhm.
My number was 147. I was way off, So, and that's when they kind of said, yeah, this really is serious.
Yeah.
We need to get this under control quickly.
Mm.
So I spent about 2-3 hours, give or take, in the hospital that day on the 19th of May. They were showing me everything I needed to do because I walked out of that hospital having to take 5 injections of insulin a day and having to do 4 ping pricks a day to test my own blood sugars. So basically 9 needles a day, and that's typical for type 1s. I imagine it's the same in the US or the same anywhere, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite a change. I don't remember much about the afternoon afterwards because it just seemed a bit surreal.
Mhm.
Basically the idea of having to manage my own medical requirements and learn how to manage it with all these different variables that you have to consider. So
Well,
I mean,
diabetes is interesting because it is,
mhm,
like you're saying, you have to manage it yourself, and it's one of those things that your body, for most people, it manages your glucose on its
mhm.
own, and you don't have to think about it, and it's one of those things that's done automatically for you, and so I can imagine the mental mind struggles with all of that. Like, oh my God, now I have to deal with managing something that my body should just be doing for me, but now I have to do it for it. It's just a whole nother thing. And I can relate to your story though on the levels. I recently was at the doctor and he was like, Andrea, I know that you look good and you think you feel good, but the inside tells a different story. He's like, your number, it was like 2,600 or something, I think. It actually might have been higher. It was something through the roof. He's like, "It's supposed to be, like, only a couple hundred." I was like, "Yeah, so it's kinda bad." And he's like, "No, it's really bad." And I was I'm like, "I know that. I'm just joking." I'm like, I get that. I see that." But it's interesting because it was such a valid point, though, that he made that sometimes the way we look on the outside and the way that we even feel sometimes can be dramatically different from what's actually happening under the surface, and we don't even realize how extreme it is, like, you were still living and breathing, and you may not have realized that, like, tomorrow could be the end. Like, you may not
Mhm.
have realized that you were that close.
That's it. That's exactly it. I was none the wiser until they brought that chart up. I mean, they'd already said that it was serious. They already said, we're amazed you're sat here talking to us happily and not lying on a bed somewhere, but it didn't twig until they showed me the chart and they showed me my numbers off the test result. And yeah, I was just like, okay, maybe I need to pay attention here.
Yeah, for
This
sure.
is, it's not ideal. I mean, I'd competed in a local event just the week before as well,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was on a circuit that I'd done numerous times before as a time trial cycling circuit. And time trialing is just you against the clock. You just got to try and set your fastest time. You're not racing against anybody per se. You set off at 1 minute intervals and you just got to try and set your fastest time. And it's typically sort of a 10 mile is a typical distance. And when I did it the week before, I was actually 6 minutes slower than previous attempts,
Mm.
which on 10 miles is not, it's a huge number. You might knock off 10, 20 seconds here and there, depending on which direction the wind's blowing or if it's a cooler day or a hotter day and so on. But 6 minutes is just ridiculous. And that was the point where I was starting to get red flags. And then ultimately I called the doctor on the 15th. But the next day, though, the 20th, that was the day that my mindset sort of switched from being in recovery mode, which had been in the last sort of few months, aiming to kind of work on my injuries and get the most out of it all and so on and so forth. That got completely sidelined. And the reality was that I had to change my direction of what I was targeting because the doctors wanted me to quit. They said, it is serious. You need to focus on your health. The team manager agreed. And to be fair, it was the right and the sensible thing to consider.
To
But
consider.
yeah, well, that's my choice of word. They thought it wasn't to consider. I should have done it. But but yeah, to be fair, it was sensible advice. I can't knock it. So, and it was the right thing to suggest as well. So, but I knew because of my background with fitness and nutrition and such like, I understood the complexity of it and the challenge that it would be. And for diabetics, typically anxiety and depression is quite common because it is a challenge to maintain it. I mean, there's any number of variables that impact your blood sugars and hypos and hypers can be really challenging for some people. And like I said, anxiety and depression are quite common in the diabetic community. But and I kind of recognized that. And when I got home, the next morning, I got up at my usual time and had a decent night's sleep. So I got up feeling like $1,000,000, even though I was still hanging out my ass, really, in all truthness. But I was still just over 70 kilos. So that morning, I woke up at a normal time. And normal time for me is like 5:30 in the morning. It's like a military thing. My body clock was set. And I woke up feeling better than I'd felt for the last 2 weeks, basically because I had insulin in my system again and my numbers were coming down. And I got up and I went through my normal routine, which typically is to get up and get a brew and then look at what's going needs to come next. I'd like to try and get the important things done first in the day.
Mm.
And the day before, the hospital had given me basically two big shopping bags full of stuff. So books and pamphlets and paraphernalia to teach me what I needed to do about carb counting and insulin dosing and all that kind of jazz and things to be aware of and blah, blah, blah. Various spare medication packs, testing kits, spare testing kits. It was a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So what I did was, with the aim of trying to understand what I was going to need to do, I laid it all out on my kitchen table. And we're talking like a typical 4 or 5 seater table. And it literally covered the table, all this stuff. And I remember looking at it and I kind of had an epiphany moment because when I spoke to doctors the day before, I'd got them to agree to let me have the weekend to think about it, the idea of what I was going to do next. Would I step back from the team or would I keep going? Bear in mind that the back of my mind about the idea that you can only compete twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to give it some serious thought. What was I going to do? So I had this epiphany moment and I was looking at all this stuff and I was going like, this is going to be a hell of a challenge. And if I'm going to make it work, I've got to set a goal that's going to be as significant as the challenge. And the epiphany kind of just hit me. It was like the significance of the goal has to match the scale of the challenge. And it's going to be a nuts challenge. So I've got to go big or I've got to stay at home. It's one of the two. So the biggest thing I can go for is a gold medal. What else can I do, to go there? And the time trial was the obvious one to target because I've got an experience with cycling, but also it's just me against the clock. I'm not in a race with other people. There's no other variables of like crossing wheels of people and getting knocked off or referees calling something wrong or like in the swimming, for example, or in the rowing or whatever. It's just me. The moment the shouts start or the gun goes, I just hit the gas and just keep going until I cross the line.
Mhm.
And as long as I leave it all out on the track, then that's all I need to do. So I use that as my target to work my way through the problem.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that I walked away from the hospital knowing that I need to take 9 needles a day, and that's standard for most diabetics. But I knew from looking at that table of stuff that in order to manage the condition around all the training, around all the calories I would need to take for the energy and all that kind of stuff because of the training I was doing and so on, and obviously all the recovery needs, all the protein and all that kind of jazz as well, I was going to need to test more often. It was a sure thing. So that happened pretty quickly. But I think by the end of the first week, I was doubling up on the needles I was taking. I was making mistakes with the insulin I was getting. So sometimes I have to correct and take more. So that was another needle again. By the second week, the number had gone up again. The most recorded blood tests I think I did was 43 in one day and
Mhm.
pinpricking. So needles in my fingers to get drops of blood.
Yeah.
And then there's the insulin injections. Then there's the corrections. So you're easily talking 50 needles in one day, maybe more, and it doesn't even include the dud test as well, because when I was in the swimming pool, I learned that if I didn't catch it early enough, then I'd have to stop training. So I learned to test more often. So it started like every 40 minutes, then it was every 30 minutes, and then it was every 20, and then 15, and so on. But every time I got out of
Wow.
the pool, I learned by mistake that if I didn't dry my hands properly,
Mm.
when I got to jab myself, the reader, the tab that you rub into the blood,
Mhm.
it would sometimes come back with a dud test. So that happened quite regularly when you're coming out of the pool and you haven't dried off properly, or a drip of water drops off your head or whatever.
Oh,
Or if you get off the bike and you're sweating your ass off, if it's a hot day, same
yeah.
principle applies. So the amount of times that happened as well. So you could probably go quite a high number above 50 in terms of the number of needles I was sticking in myself on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So it was quite stressful, shall we say,
Mhm.
to put it politely. But thankfully, the doctors acknowledged that they needed to fast track me through the typical process to get what they call the continuous glucose monitor, a CGM. And it's kind of like a device that you stick to your body, typically on your
Yeah,
arm,
your arm.
legs, and so on.
Mhm.
And it links to a receiver. And then that gives you a reading every 5 minutes. So when they gave me that, it was game changing, literally overnight. Instead of reacting to what is right now, I could proactively look at the direction it was going. I could make judgment calls based on the trend.
Mhm.
So it just made everything so much easier overnight, if that makes sense. So my confidence started going through the roof. And the reason I bring that up is because 2 weeks on from that, like I think it was the 23rd of May or 23rd of July, sorry, by this point, I was doing a PR event for my local council's fitness facility, which I'd been using for training, of something in exchange for getting cheaper prices and things like that, because
Mhm.
I was representing the country. And I was doing a video interview and they were asking me the usual sorts of questions. What do you think of the facility? What's your favorite bits of kit? What do you like to do? How is the use of this facility and this like talented athlete pass that they've given me? How is that benefiting you? Blah, 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 all that stuff. But the last question they asked me was, what are your aspirations? What is it you want to do? This was the first time that I actually laid down the gauntlet publicly,
Yeah.
and they got it on video and they asked that question. And without waiting a beat, I literally responded and went, that's easy. I'm going there to win. That
Mhm.
was it. And that's all I
Do you
said.
win if you get the gold, do you get any is there a cash prize? Is there anything or it's just the gold medal?
It's just the gold medal. It's
Okay.
just the gold
I mean,
medal.
I know that sounds bad, just the gold medal. It's interesting to me, like, why can somebody only compete twice in their life other than I mean, it feels almost like the, like, participation trophy situation where it's like, we want everybody to win, and this feels
Mhm.
like we want everybody to have a chance to win, so we gotta take out our gold medal people and, like, let other but that's, like, not that's not life, you know? Like, you want to compete against the best of the
Mhm.
best, right? And I
Absolutely.
I don't know. That's just my take. I feel like everybody should just get to keep going
Mhm.
until you can't go anymore, and then, you know.
That's it. That's
But
exactly it. I mean, the crazy thing is that they did say why it was only twice. I think it's, if memory serves me right, it's basically because they've only been doing it for 10 years and the amount of veterans around the world. because there's no age limit. You can literally keep applying for it whilst you've still got, the ability to take part. So I do think that they're trying to play catch up really in terms of giving as many the opportunities to do it as possible. But I can't be sure on that. I think that's what the answer was. But this was a few years ago now. I didn't really pay as much attention to that though, because I had my target set, so to speak. So, but I mean,
You're like, I
obviously,
got the gold. I don't care.
yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. I obviously got it. You can see it on my shoulder. But the significance of it, though, is that on the day of the event, I was only a split second ahead of the next guy. There was myself second place. I think he was like half a second behind me. And then third place, I think was 8 to 10 seconds back. The good gap between second
Yeah.
and third. So what that told me was that had I not gone through one of those jabs or one of those mistakes and learned from it and adapted what I was doing and gone through all those pains, then that might have cost me that half a second. Any one of those days I didn't do that extra test or didn't do that 50th, needle in my finger or whatever, I might not have got that half a second. And that's the way I look at it now. So
Yeah.
since then, I've kind of carried on to try and do more things. And like I said, most of the stuff behind me is stuff I've done literally since that day. And it was more about trying to set goals to keep working towards something, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So
What are your most talked about things when it comes to setting goals and actually achieving them? What are the big tips that you give people for doing that? I mean, obviously, that's very simple to just set the goal, but after that, what happens? How do you continue to push yourself when you're trying to get to that goal and you're struggling?
So I go back to that epiphany point that the significance of the goal has got to match the scale of the challenge. But at the same time, you have to recognize what it is you want to do and why you want to do it. I mean, it's no point just setting something for the sake of it. I'm going on holiday in the summer. I'm going anyway. There's no incentive to stop me going. But maybe I could try and lose some weight to look better on the beach or something like that. That's
So
not really,
okay, so you're saying you think that you have to want it so
yeah,
badly that nothing can really get in your way.
that's basically it. I mean, I say that loosely in the sense that not everyone's target is to get a gold medal. That was the first time I'd set my sight on getting a gold medal in my life. I've never had the aspiration to be the best before that.
Yeah.
I've had a few sort of accolades over the years, but nothing that compares to that. And for me, the idea that I'm trying to do for my family now is to maintain a level of resilience that means that they are less dependent on me, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
by that, what I'm saying is that I learned the hard way through that medical discharge that there is three certainties in life. And I already kind of knew of two. The one was obviously mortality. We're all going to meet our maker. Whoever what we believe that to be, it's going to happen eventually, one way or other. The second one is change, evolution, adaptation, whatever we want to call it. There's various periods of life. Things will change, whether we want them to or not. And the last one, which I learned through the medical discharge, was that we all have a level of dependency on an array of different things, whether it be the obvious stuff like the air we breathe, the food we eat, what we drink, but also like screen time, smart devices, our car to get to work, my computer here for me to be able to work from home. You could go down a whole list of different things that you rely on to some degree. And the problem I had, the lesson I learned from that medical discharge is that I was too dependent on the military to the point where I nearly failed as a direct result of that. So I learned that in order to build that level of the resilience, I needed to spread that dependency out into something I call the safety net of resilience. So you think of, take my job, because my computer is kind of sat here in front of me here. So that is an income stream. But then if I've got multiple income streams, that's multiple threads that intersect to start forming that net, if that makes sense, that safety net. You then look at your car and the idea that you keep it maintained, you get it serviced, you get it checked every year. That's threads in itself as well. You yourself personally looking after your health, staying active, eating reasonably well, drinking plenty of water, all these little things, they add little strands to that as well. That's my ultimate goal at the minute, is to make sure my family are protected and to make up for that, the mistakes I made that nearly cost us so much when I got out of the military because I put that dependency on the army.
Mm.
So that was what I was trying to do when I first got into the Invictus Games. I was trying to get myself in a better place so that I could better support my family. And the aim now, like I talked about, like training my kids to look after the dog and give my dog commands, but also I want to try and teach them other key lessons that I made the mistake on, like financial literacy, a critical one, I think, which
Mhm.
they don't typically teach in schools here in the UK, for appropriate use of smart devices, because they're amazing tools. But I don't know if you see much of the news here in the UK, but it is a big thing and a big discussion at the minute about whether they should ban devices in schools or ban phones in schools.
Yeah.
And I personally, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that at a certain age, yes, young ages, yes, I agree.
Mhm.
But banning social media to a point, yes, I agree, until they're
Yeah.
more mature minds. But smart devices, banning them entirely, I don't think that's like a good idea, because there's an array of different things you can do with that that builds on that resiliency, that net of resiliency, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And I think it's important to start teaching the younger generation that as early as possible,
Yeah.
and I learned that through my own mistakes. So
I
that,
mean, yeah, I agree and I disagree, I guess. I mean, I think at some point, yes, they have to be able to learn how to use it
Mhm.
safely before you wouldn't want your kid to not have an exposure to technology and all the things until 18 when they're also being released on their own and not under your watch anymore because they could get so it's like you want them to have that guided instruction with it, of course, but I mean, and maybe we're just totally on the same page actually, but
so,
I would
what you said there, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I would wait until way later though. Like it's very unnecessary for young children.
Oh, no, agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Mine now, not a chance. I'd say easily into double figures at the earliest,
Yes,
and
yeah.
possibly even sort of like in the early teenage years, maybe. And even then, it would be guided through. The idea of buying them at the latest smartphone or whatever and letting them have at it, unrestricted, just not a chance. But then at the other extreme, like you touched on there, the idea that they don't get access to it at all till they're 18, and then they get it completely, all of it, all at once, all completely unfiltered. That's a dangerous game, I think, if the UK, for example, goes down the route of banning it all. But yeah, sorry, I've digressed. I can get quite heavy on that. I apologize. But yeah, the point of it is though, is that when it comes to goals, it's, you've got to want it to, like, otherwise how are you going to maintain it? How are you going to want to work
No,
towards it?
you're absolutely right. I remember talking
Mhm,
to someone and we were talking about wants and needs,
mhm,
and we were talking about kind of comparing it to a homeless person, and it's
mhm,
like they need to go get a job, but do they really want it? They might need it, but do they want it bad enough? Obviously not. And I'm not going to say that about every single person. I get there are circumstances and there are definitely some homeless people that need the assistance that they are not getting. I do understand that, but that was the example she was giving, and I mean, it's the same for, like, weight loss, right? There's some people that really need to lose 200 pounds, but they just don't want it bad enough. If
mhm,
you wanted it bad enough, it's possible, right? And so sometimes
mhm.
we just don't want something bad enough, or
That's
we're
it.
just I mean, we want it, but we're exhausted, and that's a thing too.
That's true. That's true. I mean, one of the things I found though, in my humble opinion, as to why people struggle to kind of, why they hit failure so easy and then give up on targeting their goals, is
Mhm.
because they take on too much too soon, too quickly.
Mm,
A good example I like to use is take the fitness industry. The biggest intakes for most big gyms, sorry, statistically speaking, New Year's resolutions, people want to get their beach bodies or lose that bit of Christmas poundage and all that jazz. They'll join the gyms on the 1st of January. Yeah. And try
yeah.
and work towards a New Year's resolution. But typically speaking, the average person needs 6 to 8 weeks to develop a new habit from scratch.
Mhm.
And if you look at what's involved in going to the gym, it's not just a case of just slapping on some trainers and just going for a run. It's getting your bag packed, getting to the gym. That might be a 30-minute drive. It could be a 5-minute walk. When you get there, you either get changed or you go in the gym. You then start learning to use the equipment. You might have to get a trainer and all that jazz. And then you've got to do the same thing in reverse as well. Get yourself turned around, get your kit turned around when you get home, get washed, all that jazz.
Yeah.
It turns out into a half-hour routine could turn into a 2-hour epic quite quickly. So
Mhm.
it's not a small thing.
Right.
So statistically, the biggest intake's the beginning of January. The biggest drop-off statistically is the beginning of February because most people can't keep it. And it's a true statement as well. But personally, I think that's because
Yeah.
they take on too big a change.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people I mean, you think about on social media, I see it all the time where people have their New Year's resolutions and it's like they're looking to do a 180. It's
Mhm.
like, here I am and I'm gonna be somebody completely different January 1. It's like, wow, all right, let's see it. But and then nobody ever talks about it again. Everybody starts talking about it, maybe November-ish, but people start talking about it, posting about it in December. And then yeah, January comes and they talk about it through January, but then, yeah, by February, nobody's even talking about their New Year's resolution anymore, or if they accomplished it or failed it, that never even comes about.
Absolutely. It's, in my view, I think that if we just set some little goals and then built on them. So
Yeah,
the idea, you could just set yourself a target of getting up earlier every day. So you set your alarm
yeah,
30 minutes earlier with the aim of setting your body clock. Then you
yeah.
go back your normal routine. You just make that one little change. And then 2 weeks down the line, you add another little change. You get up, you get a glass of water.
Mhm.
2 weeks later, you add another little change. I don't know. It could
Micro.
be that Yeah, and you keep doing it, yeah. And then you imagine if you kept doing that every 2 weeks, you added another little change. And you did it for 6 months. You imagine what difference you could have made in 6
Yeah.
months doing that.
I
I
did
think it's
that.
much more achievable.
I did something like that with running. I hate to run, and I also feel like I can't run very long or far, and so I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna start running a minute. I'm gonna run 1 minute, 1 minute a day for a week, and then the next week I'll add a minute, and I'll just add that way it's not a lot all at once." I'll be honest, I don't think I got very far. I maybe got to 3 minutes. I don't know.
But
I
it's
hate to
building
run,
blocks. Yeah, it's building blocks. There's nothing wrong with that.
but I had a plan. I had a really good
Yeah.
plan.
And that's a good plan. That is a good plan. It is. Believe it or not, I did something similar with press ups. I was targeting doing 100 push ups a day. This was a while back. And this really works. It's a true trick. So it's something you can take away if you want to, or your listeners can take away. But if you get up and if your target is to do, say, 100 push ups in one day, you start by just doing one at a time. Do one, take a break. Do one, take a break. And you try and spread it out over time. And then
Mhm.
eventually you'll do two and then three. Same idea as what you were talking about with your running.
Okay.
Eventually you'll start doing sets of 10 and then sets of 20, and then eventually you'll just get to 100. It'll take
Yeah.
time, but you
Yeah.
just take it one day at a time and you keep building on it. But you just got to be patient.
Yeah,
So,
that's kinda what I do too. Like, this morning, I was doing some curls and changing the weight up, and I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna do 10. I'm gonna do, like, 3 sets of 10."
hmm,
And then I felt okay, and I felt like, "Okay, I need a little bit more of a push." So it was like the 3rd set, I'll do 12. And then it's like maybe tomorrow I'll do 10, 12, 12. But yeah, it's like just slowly bringing in that little bitty change. Do not take workout advice from me, though. Do not.
it's we're in a world now where people want everything right now as fast as possible and the best, most shiniest thing they can get their hands on. So as a society, we're victims of our own success, really. Where technology's advancing at a rate of knots and we want things, the shiny things, the brand new things and the weight loss and all this stuff. We want it now. We don't want to
Mhm.
put the work in, typically speaking, do we? Weight loss drugs are a big thing, or at least they're coming through or spoken about on the news quite a lot here in the UK now as well.
Oh, here
I think
too, yes.
yeah, if people just step back and just did it a bit at a time and just
Yeah.
gave themselves 6 months. It's a blip in the grand scheme of things, 6 months.
And I think there's genuinely people out there that really do probably need some assistance with
Mhm,
getting some of that initial weight off and whatever, but then there certainly are people that, like you're saying, they're not putting the time in for sure or
mhm.
making the right choices, the right food choices. But I get it, like, I love food and I had to give up so much. My ulcerative colitis has just been a hot mess, and so, like, my god, it's been actually, I think, a year since I changed things up. It's been several years since I went gluten free, but I've actually stuck with that. I've been gluten free now for I don't even know how many years, 3, 4 ish. And now I'm just super used to it. And now, I was actually thinking about it the other day. I don't even know if I would want anything with gluten. This is all I know now at this point. If I needed bread or I need this or that, like I know exactly what I would go to and I'm used to it and I like it. So I'm not seeking or needing any of that. But yeah, it's a process and it's hard sometimes because food is yummy, but there we can find alternatives. But anywho, okay, so back to your journey. So right here we are. So you go and you get the gold medal. And after that, what did you feel? What did you feel from getting that gold medal?
Well, as embarrassing as this is to say, this is actually on video for everyone to see. The world's media was there because it was actually Prince Harry that put it around my neck.
Okay.
So all the photographers and videoers were all there, all the people you'd expect to see there with someone like that there. And what's her name? Megan was there as well. So they had all the world's media there around us. And it was quite a surreal experience, but it was a bit of a blur as well. So when I watch it back, I can kind of picture in mind what was going on because I'd put myself under a lot of pressure to fulfill this goal.
Yeah.
And when he put it around my neck, I just couldn't contain it. And you can see that in this video. It's on YouTube as well, by the way. In fact, if you look on my YouTube channel, I put a clip of it on there. It's one of the newest videos I put up there. And the key bit of that is that it was Prince Harry's birthday on the same day. And it's also my wife's birthday as well.
Mm,
And she was on the other side of the barriers with my daughter, my eldest daughter, Sophia, who was 4 at the time. And Prince Harry actually went over to the barriers, picked my daughter up over the barrier. She comes running up to me. We have a great big cuddle. I'm doing the typical Scottish thing, wearing my kilt as well. The media are having a full on frenzy because they're seeing all this emotion going on. I'm completely oblivious to all that at this point now. When walking over to the barrier to my wife as well, and we had a massive, great big family moment because the truth of it is my wife is the only one who really saw everything that I was going through day in, day out with this,
Yeah.
with learning to live with this condition and learning to train with it as well. And I say that because I saw the team with some level of regularity, but it was mostly every other weekend. Most of the training camps were down in England where I'm located. It's about 8 hours drive to the north of there. So I didn't see my team that often. So
Mhm.
they weren't really exposed to what I was doing day in, day out all the time.
Mhm.
So that moment that you can see on this video clip, it was basically us just letting go of all that drama that we'd had to deal with. And you see what the moment where it kind of washes off us and we just start getting happy because, like I said, it was my wife's birthday and I was so focused on the race and so focused on getting ready. I hadn't said anything to her all morning at all. I hadn't seen her because we were staying in different hotels. And I had my sparring on, which is that little pouch that we have on the front of our kilts.
Mhm.
And I pulled a birthday present out of my sparring, handed it over to her. It's a happy birthday to her. And all the cameras are all getting this and loving it. And I didn't notice till afterwards, but the commentator on the tannoy, he's talking about this at the same time. And you hear him on the video saying, "Oh, look, and he's just telling her now he hasn't actually forgotten her birthday." And it was quite comical because then Prince Harry comes over and we're like, "Oh, yeah, everybody's having a cuddle at this point and saying happy birthday to each other and so on and so forth."
Yeah.
But then the funny story is I'd put the medal over my daughter's neck, giving Sophia back to my wife, to Stephanie. And Prince Harry had then got myself and Casper and Kenny, the silver and the bronze medalist, two absolutely lovely blokes from Denmark. And we started walking back up the finishing lane. And it was only we got halfway up when I realized that I'd left the medal around Sophia's neck and she'd legged it. So I'm walking up there with the other medalists with their medals around their neck with Prince Harry there. And I'm just sat there, oh, I got to just roll with it.
I swear I won.
So, you know, so yeah, so again, you can see all this as well on this video clip. So yeah, it was a good laugh. When you look back at it now, I do have a bit of a laugh with it, but
Yeah.
yeah, at the time, it was just a massive release of pressure, and you can
Yeah.
kind of see that when you watch it back,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's something I'll experience again. Well, I certainly hope I don't, because it took a life-threatening condition to do it. So I don't want to go through it again personally.
Yeah.
I look back and I think, why would someone turn themselves into a human pincushion for
Yeah.
this kind of thing? And whilst I'm glad I did it, I couldn't ever see myself doing it.
Mhm.
It's one of those crazy things that it's kind of surreal now. I just think, did I really do that? Did I seriously? And I look back on my medical charts and you can see it's all recorded. And it's just like, that's just
Yeah.
incredibly nuts. I just can't imagine why.
We
But
definitely yeah, we definitely always do some crazy things that we don't realize how crazy, they are until we get to the other side of it and look back, and it's like, "Wow, I was
Mhm.
nuts."
Yeah, I definitely count. Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
another one I've add to my resume is walking pincushions.
yeah. So, David, what is your number one thing that you say to people when they're really struggling and they're just down in a hole?
So I've got a problem solving process that I've
Mhm,
learned over time with the military, and I learned to articulate in the last sort of couple of years as a result of all this and starting my own business in speaking and trying to help people with their personal resilience. And that's my primary sort of aim at the minute, is to help people do that. And it's a 5-step process. And the first one is absolutely critical because one of the big mistakes I see people making, like we talked about earlier with the goal setting, is they make it too complex too quickly. They overthink it, they take on too much, and then it overwhelms them in some way, shape, or form. And it ultimately they end up quitting.
mhm,
So the first thing is to do something simple. And for me, I get up and I get a brew. I mentioned that earlier. The day after my diagnosis, I got up, I went through a normal routine. I went and got a brew and then I sat down. The second thing is to then, I like to say, give it a kiss. KISS is that acronym. I'm sure you've heard it as well. It's that keep it super simple. I just like to say, give it a kiss because it just gives a mild jovial sound to it, doesn't it? But that was the idea of me laying everything out on the kitchen table and starting to break it down because the third step is to get understanding. And
mhm,
I say understanding and not to understand because I don't need to know the detail of it. I don't know the medical terminology for this condition or how my pancreas produces insulin or doesn't produce insulin in my case, and all the medical terminology going. I haven't got a clue. Don't know. Don't need to know all that stuff. That's just another level of detail. I just need to know what I need to do next and why I need to do it. The fourth step is to embrace the change and the inevitable mistakes. And obviously, I'm a prime example that you can get a lot of mistakes and they can come in droves. And
mhm,
every one of those needles I had was just an example of yet another mistake. So it was really hard to do that, to take that challenge on mentally.
well,
But you've got to embrace the mistakes because, in my humble opinion, mistakes, our failures are our greatest source of education. As long as we're prepared to learn from them,
yeah,
we can adapt and move on. And that's the final
yeah,
step. And it's to learn, adapt, repeat. So
mhm,
the critical thing I would tell anybody is back to number one, is to do something simple. Put that foot forward, take an action, simple action that doesn't require a lot of thought, because taking action is a step forward towards a resolution. If you're just going to sit back and think about
Yeah.
it, that's all you'll ever do. Well, think about it, think about it, think about it. I can think about making £1 million, but it isn't going to put £1 million in my account. It's the action towards doing that, getting a business started, making it a success, and then bringing it home. That's what will get me to £1 million. But the thinking about it isn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
So doing something simple is absolutely critical, in my view. And it
Absolutely.
could be just having a breath. It could be drinking a glass of water. In my case, it's make a cup of coffee. You know,
Mhm. Yeah. Do something simple and learn to feel accomplished with that simple thing and then add to it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. This was such a great conversation, and I'm so happy you're on the other side of all of this.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you.